I want to welcome everyone. My name is Tim Lambert and I'm the Director of Construction Resources here at Practical Software. I've been in construction for over 30 years working in both residential and commercial. Today I'd like to talk to you about how I think we can help you find a solution for your business. If you're a general contractor, a subcontractor, a residential builder, or for that matter almost anyone else associated with the building side of the industry, we can assist you with automation, estimating, project management, mobile access, and construction accounting that's actually designed for construction companies. Today I'd like to take a tour with you of Sage 100 Contractor. 100 Contractor has been around for over 35 years. In the early 80s, a GC by the name of Dan Smith was looking for a better way to run and track his business. He couldn't find what he liked, so he made one. Today we call his solution Sage 100 Contractor. The software sits on a Microsoft SQL backbone, making it flexible, reliable, and secure. It can be installed on a single workstation, a client server environment, or cloud hosted, and with concurrent licensing you have the flexibility to share licenses among users, giving you more access with less money. The core of the software comes with everything needed to manage your business: general ledger, cash management, credit card management, AP compliance, payroll, accounts receivable, time and material billing, progress billing, project management with change orders, commitments, so on and so on. Add to that some optional modules for equipment management, basic estimating, inventory control, and service receivables, and you can see why we say we've got a solution for you. Now I'd like to take things up one more notch with Sage Companion software. Sage offers many solutions that integrate with our accounting software. Sage Paperless is there to help you with that volume of documents that all projects produce. Service Ops will extend work orders to the cloud. Field Ops gives your superintendents remote time entry and daily field reports in the field where it belongs. Sage Construction Project Center pushes your project managers out the front door and onto the job with real-time job costing, contract management, and change order tracking. With Sage Estimating, you have one of the oldest and most reliable pre-construction solutions on the market. Add in eTakeoff as a digital solution and you put 2D and 3D in your toolbox. For more information on these companion solutions, take a look in the notes below. So let's drop out of this and together we're going to take a tour of Sage 100 Contractor. Contractor estimating that's built into the software. It has a pound sign here to tell you that these are the optional modules, so you'll know as we go through. I'm going to cover project management, document control, go into scheduling, AR and AP. I want to cover service receivables, cover inventory, cover equipment management, and then move into payroll and general ledger, and then finish up with some odds and ends, just so that you can kind of go through the path we're going to go through. To start with, I want to talk a little bit about the layout that's here. If you're looking at the menu, Sage offers you a lot of different options for going in. You can either go in through a standard menu, you can go through in a custom menu you create for yourself, you can go through the tabs and get where you want to go. You can also go through flowcharts. So there are a lot of ways to get where you want to go. Talk a little bit about the home and resources. This is really where the main or frontline help resides. There's a great online help topic so that as soon as the software is updated, the help topics are updated. You can get product documents here. You can go to Sage support as well as chat. You can enter support tickets, go to the knowledge base. The newest version, which this is, it came out a few weeks ago, is called, there's a Sage messaging piece that's in here. So anytime there's an update or a notice or something that's important, you actually get notified inside the software instead of getting an email. Makes things a little bit nicer. There's a user group, it's called TUG, that you can become a member of. It's actually run by people who own the software. Sage is involved with it, but we're not the ones that run it. It is user driven, for a lack of a better word. Sage University, forums, and so forth. There's also a great enhancement piece in here so that if you want to submit an idea, if there's an idea, something you'd like to see in the software, Sage actually uses those ideas to work on the development. In fact, this last version, 90% of the changes and the updates in the software came from user recommendations from the enhancement plan. So it's a great piece to have. So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about the dashboard. The dashboard is the front end of the software. It gives you a landing place to go in, and it can actually be customized to what your particular role is in the software. If you are part of an accounting group, You can pick from the widgets, and let me drag this over here. You can pick from the widgets that have to do with the general ledger. If you're more of an AP or accounts receivable person, you can grab those widgets. There's also a large list of project widgets as well as an alert widget, and we'll talk about alerts at the end when we get to odds and ends. So this gives you a snapshot of what's going on in your company when you go in each time. You can leave this as an automated pop-up, or you can reduce it down when you come in, or you can have it on demand only. Okay, let's get started. We're going to go ahead and hop into Sage Estimating. So we're going to close out of this, go over to the System menu, and go down. And by the way, these menus are actually number pad driven as well, so I could just as easily come in and push 9 and hit enter, and push 5 and hit enter. It's designed around fast entries, designed around to get you in, get you out as fast as it can. So I'm going to use 220 today, so I'm going to double click on this and open up this particular, and I'm going to go ahead and enlarge it so you can see everything. And there are a lot of shortcuts in here, and so some of them I'll try to remember to name as I go, but there's an auto fit, so you can shrink things up and see. But anyway, the layout looks very similar to an Excel, but it's actually tied all together. An estimate in Sage is made up of parts, assemblies, or just manual entries. And just to kind of walk through things, you can divide it into as many bid items as you want to, or you can put it all in one bid item. Each bid item can be divided into as many phases as you want to, or you can put it all in one phase. It really is your preference and depending on what you want to see on the back end. And so I'm going to hop in bid item 2 just to kind of show you what things look like. I've got a part number here for carpentry with man hours, quality. I've got overhead, profit. I've got cost codes tied to it. If I want to look at where this particular part number came from, I can just hit F6. It's one of the shortcuts. It's going to bring up this part. And you can kind of see what's in here. It's carpentry, it's man hours. I can put an alpha part number in. I can classify them in groups, makes it easier to get to. I can go ahead and put some default cost codes and cost types. That way it pre-fills. I can assign tasks to it. There are a lot of pieces we can go through in here. If this were an inventory item, I could check the inventory. If it is an inventory item and I bought it from vendors, there's actually going to be a vendor history here and a purchase history. So it lets you keep track of a lot of things inside here as well as a cost. There's also a facility to update these costs with an Excel import. So you're not manually updating these costs. There's also a piece built in the software that lets you take this estimate and update your database, or take your database and update an old estimate. So it's a two-way street when you get into it. Assemblies are the same way. I could hit F6 and open up. F6 is just a general key for new add record. I can look at an existing record, or I can add a new with the F6. They'll also go through the menu items, so it's just a shortcut from inside a particular module into another piece. You can see that this is made up of the same general information. I have all my parts, and then I have quantities based on a single unit. That just means that this assembly, for every 1 linear feet, I want to add 1.2 of this, 1 of this, 8 of this, to pull in all of that data at one time so that you can, again, speed and accuracy matter. So this allows you to go through and create that estimate as fast as possible, but as accurate as possible as well. To talk a little bit about that process, there's also tags available in the software. I can right click here and I can add a tag. What tags really are just a better way to quickly enter information. I can go in and say this is an estimate only, wait for quote. Click OK. So if I'm working on this, I can see I got a red tag here. I know that there's something going on here, so that when I'm working on the estimate, I don't submit it prematurely because I forgot to put in a new quote. I can also look down here at row tags, and it's going to pop up a screen and it's going to let me know where all of those are, and I can drill out to them and I can figure out what's going on. So it's just, again, ways to better keep up with information. From here, we can export this into a grid file, takeoff file, project file. It's just a way of storing the data outside of the software. And you'd ask why to do that. Well, the reason we would do that, if I'm doing a similar project, I can export this data and then import it back into a new project and just change my amounts, or update my quantities, or update my cost without having to rebuild the wheel. So there are a lot of shortcuts that are designed in the software to let you do it. Also, when this is done, I can go through and I can push out my proposal, which is your AI billing, your schedule of values. I can create my budget, your change order. You can create your purchase orders, requests, subcontracts. It allows you to push all of this data out so that you're not manually creating it later. So it's a great place to start. Also, when you're working in here, one of the things, and I mentioned tasks earlier, all of this pushes into a Gantt chart. So it allows you to schedule your job starting all the way back at the estimate level, so you can keep track of everything. You can do add-ons at the end, your last page items, if you're used to that kind of estimate. You can go through and put in your liability insurance, and it's going to look back at the labor value that's in there so it can do the calculation. You can create some use tax information as well as bonding information. You can create cost codes for everything here, and then you can assign those to particular bid items. A lot of ways to work within the software and within estimating. So it's a great landing place to start. So from here, I'm going to move over and we're going to take a look at project management. Okay, let's move into project management. So there are a lot of parts to this, and I'm going to kind of walk through each piece, not necessarily in any particular order, but just kind of give you a bird's eye view again of the software. Actually going to start in accounts receivable. I know that sounds odd, but that's where you create the jobs. And so I'm going to go into and pull up a job record. We've been looking at 220 for a lot of this. I'll pull that up. This is a time and material job. That's one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later. You can create time and material contract jobs, unitary jobs, a lot of different ways of doing the process. It does allow you to specify that it's a certified payroll. You can require federal sick leave accrual as well as WIP asset accounting. The tabs at the bottom let you keep track of what's going on. Expand this so you can see all of them. What's going on with this job? So it allows you to go in and you can look at what subcontracts are tied to the job or what payments are tied to the job. There's some static information, contacts. You can have as many contacts as you want to that tie to the job. You can put in all of your information about your employees. You can put in who's the estimator is, who's the salesman is. There's job security that's available where I can lock out certain people from some jobs, let other people in. There are job types, which allows for reporting purposes so that you can better keep track of what's going on in your business. You can segment those jobs. There's also a status piece that lets you walk the job through the process. It starts out as a bid. Hopefully it never sees refusal and it immediately becomes a contract. It moves into current, completed, and closed. So it lets you go through that. There's also a little piece, and you'll see this throughout a lot of screens in the software. It's a records lookup piece. It's called a query. And so I'm going to reach and grab this from the other monitor. This is actually a multi-monitor software. I can drag things between 5 and 6 monitors and have multiple things open at the same time. It lets you create queries to where you can run a query, and I want to look at by client, so I can run this query. Grab this and put it over here. And so I can pick a particular client. I'm going to hit F5, which is my lookup button, and go in and grab that list, and I want to see which jobs are tied to a particular client. And it goes in and it pulls out some information. These queries are actually all custom built. There are some that come standard with the software. All of these come standard, but it allows you to create them. So you can go and take an existing and make a copy of it, or you can edit an existing, or you can create a new query. And it's a great way to get comfortable with software. You can look up about anything you want to look up. So it starts with a job. You create the job, and then just as we did, we would have gone through and we'd have done our estimate and we pushed everything out. And so I want to start with a budget. Let's look at the budget for this job. So we'll go in here and pull up a budget. And I'm going to start with our good friend number 220. The software keeps up with the budget at a cost code level and at a category level. So for each cost code, you can have material, labor, equipment, subcontract, other. You can have hours, and these are the man hours for your employees. It lets you keep with both sides of it. I can have, if I scroll this over, you can see, I can save this as an original. Pop down here and set the budget, and it says my original over here. So if I come and tinker with it on this side, I still have the original over there. You can have, just pop out of here. I can also export those budget files. So if I've got a very similar job and I just want to pull in the budget from a previous job, it lets me do that. Go into proposals. We'll pull up our same little job, 220. Again, this is at a cost code level. This now can become my schedule of values. I can export this out and import it directly into my AI billing, into my progress billing, I should say, and it allows me to not recreate the wheel again. There's no reason, since I know what my proposal is going to be, I know what it came from estimating, I really don't have to re-enter everything every time I need it. It lets you push everything through the software a little bit easier. This one is at a cost code level. You could just as easily have one at a bid item level, and I think that one is 224. This is at a bid item level. So if I got a client who wants to see everything exactly the way they want to see it, this allows you to create those bid items that match the categories they want to keep up with, and then record your proposals and your contract billing at that level. Keep up with the way they want to keep up with it. It also does unitary billing. That tends to be more road work, but it does keep up with it. That's when you want to bill by the mile, by the yard, by the acre. It allows you to track at a bid item level units, quantities, and billing. There's also a unitary progress billing in here, so that not only are you keeping up with the proposal at that level, but you're doing your billing at that level. Talk a little bit about project management and commitments. There is a purchase order piece designed in the software. I'm going to pop up and look at record 15. Well, actually, let me hit the drop down so you can see that. There's a lookup for these records so you can go through. I can sort by record number, or I could sort by vendor name, or I could sort by job number. There are a lot of ways of sorting the data. I'm going to sort by record number because the one I want is number 15, and pull up number 15. All the information I need for my PO is here. This one happens to have phases, so I've got multiple phases for this job. I got the PO, my description, who created the PO, the address where it's going to be shipped. Scroll down here and shrink this up so I can read all of it. It also keeps up with what's going on with the PO. What have I received today? So I can figure out what I've got on back order. There's some auto close pieces in here. You can also limit access to AP through a purchase order. I can set a vendor and say I'm not allowed to receive an invoice unless there's a PO that goes with it. A lot of ways you can control your cost. Same thing with subcontracts. POs are all about quantities and material. Subcontracts are about dollars. In this case, I'm going to look at record 28. Subcontract. Going to open this up and again get our columns where we can see it. Got all the pertinent information. It's current. What type? These are custom fields. I can create whatever type. I can also keep up with my performance bond, my bids and retention in here. It does keep up with full retention at a vendor level as well as a job level. So you have a retention on your billing and retention on the bills that are coming through the door. While we're here, I just want to pop out to the reports right quick just so you can kind of see. We'll pop this over. Subcontracts. There are a lot of ways you could print out a subcontract. The software comes with a few built-in forms. This is one. This is just a very simple subcontract form where you can go through and look at the information. But I can get more complicated if I want to. I've got a few custom ones that I've built for clients that can be a little more complicated. This particular one is 5 pages long. I've got a couple that we put together that are actually 20, 25 pages long. So you can have as complicated a verbiage as you want, or keep it as simple as you want. It's really up to you. While we're here, just a quick note about what's going on up here. I've been printing it to screen. I could have just have easily printed it to my default printer. I could have printed it to Excel, to Word, to a PDF, to Outlook, direct email out of the software. If you've got a fax machine hooked up to your computer, you can fax it from here. You can also schedule reports. So I could say I want to print a job costing report, schedule it to be emailed to my project manager every Sunday night. Every Sunday night, that project manager is going to get an email with the job cost report attached. If a report can be modified in the software, it'll have the modify report, and it allows you to, there's a built-in report writer here, so you can create your own reports as well as modify existing ones. And I'm not going to save my changes. I'm going to hop into purchase orders, or actually change orders next, just to kind of walk through change management. change orders in 100 Contractor actually have two sides the way the software is designed, and I'm just going to pull up an existing one. This one is for job number 215. Expand this out so you can see it. Right now I'm on what's called the Prime Change tab. This is the contract side. This is the side that sees your client. So in this case, this is a change order for $1,138 and change. What cost code it has to go with and what markup I put on it and all the pertinent information, and I can print this change out and get a signature. But instead it has two sides. This is the other side. It's the budget side. I can look at what's going on in my budget here, what cost code I need to hit. This one actually has a little more information. Shrink it up. This is my change in budget. I already had a subcontract on this line item when I started the project. So this change actually changed my subcontract. So I record it here. I put in the vendor that's involved, I put the subcontract number and the line that's involved on it, and it physically changes that subcontract to meet this change order. So in one document, I have created a commitment change order, a budget change order, and a contract change order, and it's all in one place. So it keeps things nice, simple, and easy. Talk a little bit about reporting, because in many ways, reporting is what drives everything else. What's going on my job? What do I need to do? What have I not done? And so I'm just going to do a quick highlight of what's available. You can see there are a lot of different options when it comes to reporting. I'm going to start with a status report. And we'll use our ever popular post office. Status report just is a quick snapshot of the job. It lets you know what's going on approved-wise, contract, any changes, billing, percent to date. It gives you that snapshot information. If I need more information, I can run a different report, or I can actually stop here. I can go over and look, and so here's my budget. Or actually, let me go into a different one, just so you can see. This is a cost journal, and there are a lot of different cost journals. You can see there's a lot of different cost journals. I'm going to pick one that is by cost code, and I'm going to run it for a particular job. The criteria that's listed here is up to you. I could filter and say I only want to look at particular cost codes, or only jobs that are at a particular status, or only things that come from a particular source. I could go in and say I only want to look at costs that come from vouchers or AP checks. A lot of ways to filter your data. Many of the reports in Sage are drillable. And so I can come in, I'm looking here at a job cost report at a cost code level. And if I want to see what's going on with this cost, I don't recognize it, I'm not sure, I can actually drill into it in the software, and it's going to pull up my job cost entry that has all the job cost information that's tied to it, and it tells me this came from an AP invoice. I don't want to see the AP invoice, so I can go to the source. Here's the AP invoice. How everything processed, where it went to, what batch it went to. I want to see what happened to my general ledger. I can go one more deeper, and there's the journal transaction created by the AP invoice, which created the job cost record, which created the report. So there's a lot of ways of grabbing the data without going anywhere. You can stay right here and stay at home and grab everything you need for your reporting. Also, one of the things in the software, if you're not sure what a report looks like, you can click on the sample notes. Before you run it, you get a quick picture of what it looks like and how you're going to get there. There's also a reports tab up here with a search function. If you want to run a report and you don't remember where the report is, and you just remember a few words, you can actually click in here and specify some search parameters. I want to look for something that only says job cost, or something that says aging. Let you walk through those processes. Lastly, I want to cover a little bit about Project Work Center. Pop this up. Project Work Center is kind of a one-stop shop for information about a particular job. So I can go in, I can put my job in, see if I can find one that's got some data in here. There we go. I can go in and put in my job. I can look at what's going on in AP. I can look at what's going on in payroll, project management, all the different pieces, and always I'm looking at the same job. I also get to look at the hot list. Anytime something happens in Sage, you get the option of marking it as a hot list item. I put in an invoice and I want to ask the PM about it. I've put in a payroll record. I want to check with the superintendent. I can mark it as a hot list item. It shows up here. I can drill down, see what's going on, get my answer, clear the hot list, and take it off my list. So this is kind of an issues list that's built into the software. All right, next we're going to move into document control. Document control is one of our optional modules. I'll kind of open it up so you can see. This is where you manage the paperwork as much as anything. It is an optional module. You can do a request for proposal from a vendor, request for information from a subcontractor, transmittals, submittals. If you have submittals for the owner or for the architect, this keeps track of it. There's a plan records where you keep track of plans. There's also a daily field report. I'll pop into that one just so you can see what it is. Daily field report is exactly what it sounds like. What went on that day, what employees worked here, how many hours they worked, if there were any subcontractors that came on the job, what they did, if I used a piece of equipment, tie all of that together. And if I'm doing unitary billing, this is where I'd record my unitary billing, my current weather. I can put notes, and the notes in Sage are a little bigger than a note. This actually holds around 32,000 characters, so you can do half the Constitution in here and save to each document. At the bottom you have some additions to the daily field report. We could have an incident on the job, injury, someone broke an arm and the time it happened. We could have meetings where we'll discuss the daily meeting, and you can have more than one meeting, more than one type. Why we had it, there was some heat exhaustion, who was at the meeting, any notes that go with it. I can also put in requests for POs. It doesn't actually create a PO, it keeps a request for a PO so it can be approved somewhere down the line. That's the daily field reports. This little button here, enter custom fields, meant to talk about it earlier. Custom fields, Sage went to a almost universal custom field policy for daily field reports, for vendor records, for payroll records, for employees, for job records, for client records. There are custom fields. So I can create any number of custom fields. I can give them types, whether it's a character, a number, checkbox, so forth. I can set security for it, and I can have as many of these that I need, because every job is different. Every customer is different. Your needs are not the same as someone else that also owns the software. So it's very customizable, makes it fit what you want to do. Speaking of which, if I don't want to call it weather, I can actually change the name. If I hit F7 and I've got rights, F7 is the security button. If I hit F7, I've got rights to enter. Go in and decide who gets to get in here, but I can actually change the name of this field. If I want to call it weather, I can call it something else. Again, very customizable software. Punch list, exactly what it sounds like. Correspondence is a correspondence log. Project hot list is very similar to the project work center that we talked about earlier. Difference is this is just hot list items. It doesn't go into all other pieces. It lets you pull up hot list items, and you can pull it up at a supervisor level or a job level. So if you're the supervisor for 5 different jobs, I could pull up just my hot list items and it will cover all the jobs. Or if I want to look at a single job, let you go through, look what those hot lists are. I can go in, this is a roofing. I can pop in and look at the invoice that's on the hot list. Looks fine with me. I don't have a problem with it. I can uncheck it, save it, exit out, and it pulls it off the hot list and marks it in italics as being taken care of. So next, I want to hop into scheduling. I'm going to actually hit escape and close everything up, and we'll open up scheduling. Scheduling can be one of the hardest parts to do in a job. Things are changing constantly as you walk through the process. So Sage 100 Contractor has a scheduling piece that's tied into it. I'm going to go into a particular job. We had talked about earlier when we were over in estimating where those tasks went to. This is where they go to. The tasks are something you create. You decide what you need to track your job. I'm going to auto fit again so I can look at more columns at the same time. And I'm going to enlarge this and give a full screen view. I have tasks, how long the task takes, what type of task it is. I can have multiple task types. so I can keep track of what's going on in the job. Again, this is a custom list. You decide what it is. And when the job starts, you put in a start date. And if you've set up these durations and how they affect each other, it's going to create your Gantt chart. So I'm going to pop down here and pop that Gantt chart in. Right now I'm looking at a month view. I could just as easily look at a week view. I can look at a quarter view and tie it in. As something changes, I can go back and I can update the values. So I'm going to hit here and scoot this over and change this to 6 days. And now I've updated my chart based on the change in workflow. I can keep track of the critical paths, what's tied to what. The software also allows you to keep up with what days you actually work. You can decide whether or not you get Saturdays off, whether or not you get Sundays off, and there actually is a company calendar. You can put in the holidays for the year, and if you specify this is a holiday and we get our holidays off, it will recalculate the Gantt chart based on that. So it gives you maximum flexibility in how you process everything. It also lets you keep track of what's going on the job. So you can say, I need certain employees to be at this task, or I need to make sure I bring certain pieces of equipment at this point in the job. I need my subcontractors either on site or delivering at this point on the job. So it lets you keep track of all of that as part of scheduling. You can manage these here. You can also manage in reports. It will print Gantt charts across multiple pages, or if you have tabloid size 11 by 17 paper, you can get most Gantt charts on a single page. Next on our list, I'm going into accounts receivable. Open up an invoice and pick one. Invoicing in Sage 100 Contractor can be done in many ways. I can do a simple invoice, which is what this is, kind of one line, the information. Actually, let me do this where you can see it. The information, what general ledger it's hitting, whether or not it's taxable, what type of invoices it is. Again, the general information, I could drill down and look at the journal transaction created by it, or I could look at the payment history. Or I can get a little more complicated. I could go into progress billing. And for those familiar with AIBill, pull this up. I'm going to grab an AIBill. Again, I can sort any way I want to in here. I can look at any particular item. I'm going to open this one. And I'm going to shrink some things up. I have my schedule of values, what's scheduled, any change orders that have come in either here or at the end, depending on your preference, what the revised contract is, and any previous. So it rolls just like a standard progress bill if you're familiar with them. I can post this. There are a lot of different options when it comes to printing. As most of you know, AIA billing is a trademark of AIA. So they're the only guys that can provide the forms. They're the only ones that can actually put AIA on their 702 and 703s. Sage offers you the option of doing a form fill. It's exactly what it sounds like. You purchase the AIA documents from AIA, you load them in the printer, and it prints out just the information and does a form fill for you. G702, G703. If you're not required for an AIA, you can just use one of the progress bills that are already built into the software. It's going to print the grid for the 702. It's going to print all the columns and the continuation sheets for the 703. You can also put your logo in if you want to. We talked a little bit about time and material billing. Pop over here so we can just look at that. The setup for a time and material is fairly simple. At the same time, it's not. So I'm going to pull this over and pull up that job that we talked about before. Time and material is exactly what it sounds like. I can come in and I can put my markups, what I want to make on my equipment. I can put in rate schedules for equipment, rate schedules for labor. And just to show you what that schedule looks like, bring this up. I can bill out these 3 employees at these rates. I can also say if it's not one of these three, bill everybody else at $30. I can also say, and this is the part where it really is nice, I can come in and say roofing, for example. I'm billing $60 an hour for my roofers. And the software works on a hierarchy. So when this employee is working, it hits this. If an employee is working on the roof, it hits the roofing amount. If it's not any of the above, it's going to hit the $30 and it's going to bill it out. It keeps track of all of the costs that come in, all of the changes that come in. Pop out of this. At a cost code level and at a job cost level. So I'm going to open up a job cost just so you can see what I'm talking about. Every transaction that happens in the software creates this job cost record. It has a time and material tab. So when I bill a piece of material, it's actually going to go and it's going to say this has been billed. And so it automatically creates the record, it creates the markup, it creates the invoice that you send out. And when you do your time and material for the next week, you don't have to keep up with, did I bill this last week? Have I billed this yet? Where is that invoice? I can't remember if I took care of it. Software is going to do it for you. It's going to keep up with it. There's also unitary billing. We talked about that before, that you can go. You can also keep up with client information. You can assign clients to jobs so that as part of the AR system, you can walk through and keep track of reporting at a client level. If I'm doing repeat customers, so to speak, I can keep up with that. It does allow you to print statements. You have a nice list of client documents, job documents, overdue receivable reminders, aging lists, all of that's built into the software. And you do have the option of a recurring receivable. If there's something that you bill for each month, you can set up that recurring receivable and the software will create that entry for you. Just to show you an invoice list as an example. Again, just because there are 11 items doesn't mean there's 11 reports. Under this one item, we can look at an AR invoice long form, sorted alphabetically by client or job, or sorted strictly by client, or long, or by job, short, by client job. A lot of different options on how it looks and a lot of different criteria you can specify. Again, the modify and the create are here. Oh, create shortcut. I haven't talked about that yet. Create shortcut is a great thing. If I have something I do every day, if I have something that I want to keep up with, I can say, I'm running this job a lot. It's a long-term job. So I'm going to save that as a default. So now that pre-fills when I want to run it. And I want to get to it a lot faster. I click here and I say, I want a shortcut for it. Now it's up here. I can put shortcuts on any tab and makes it quick and easy to get where I want to go. You can also create and work on these. If you don't want that one, I can hit on the delete and take that one back out and hit save. If you've rearranged everything and you've made a real mess of it, there's actually a restore in here that you can restore it back to factory default and start over, or you can clear it. A lot of ways to get around in the same thing. Okay, we covered project management, we've covered job cost, we've covered billing. It's time to pay the bills. So we're going to talk about accounts payable. I'm going to start with a vendor, just so we can kind of see what a vendor record looks like. We'll open it up. There are a lot of ways to get where you want to go. I'm going to hit the down arrow and actually look up a vendor, but this time rather than sorting it, I'm going to look at the types that are over here. So if I'm looking for a drywall supplier, I can click on my type and it picks a drywall. So I'm going to open this one, double click and open it up. Again, it has the standard information. It has a place where you can keep up with multiple contacts. You have some user-defined fields. You can assign tax districts. If you're doing some federal or state work that require percentages for women-owned business, disabled vet, and so forth, you can tag your vendors so that when it comes time to award contracts, you can print out specific reports that let you know who are my minority-owned or disabled vet vendors. Keeps track of it. The financial information is exactly what it sounds like. You put in the federal ID and so forth. It does let you specify what type of 1099 this gets. An email, if you want to email out the 1099 and get the permission, it keeps up with values. It has an internal vendor box where you can check and say, I never receive an invoice, but I need it, like an architect or an engineer. Somebody that you do work with, but you don't get billed for it. All the ones at the bottom are for looking up data. I can look and see if I have any paid invoices. I can look and see if I have any open contracts and so forth. I can also keep track of certificates. And a certificate can be anything you want it to be. It can be your workers' comp, surety bond, job liability. The software sets all of this up as a warning system. So when I go to enter a subcontract for this vendor, if his workers' comp is expired, it's going to pop up and say, you have an expired certificate and you need to fix it. After the subcontract is in, if I receive an invoice, it's going to give me a warning. After I receive the invoice, if I go to print a check, it's going to give me a warning. It's going to give you multiple times to make sure you get what you're supposed to get. There's also an alert system that's built into the software. You can set up the alert to notify me today of any vendor who has an expired certificate next week. So you get that prior notice. It does work at the vendor level, and as you can see, at a job level. So you can have workers' comp, surety bond for the vendor itself, but you could also require a liability and a surety bond that's tied to the job and let you keep track of all that information. Again, you specify different types for vendors. The vendor defaults are just what pre-fills when you enter stuff in, whether or not you're going to require PO or subcontract, whether or not you're going to require use tax, whether or not you're actually keeping some of the money. If you have some subcontractors that don't have their own liability insurance, or their own workers' comp insurance, and you are actually paying their workers' comp for them, you can do a withholding on their invoice. And when the invoice comes in, you hit the withholding button. It'll calculate the workers' comp based on the rate here, and it will hold a portion of it so that they're actually paying their own workers' comp through you. Let you keep track of that. Other defaults are just really quick. If you want to specify a particular type of request for proposal or a type of work order or subcontract, you can specify that here. Software also has an ACH feature. It lets you create ACH files that you can upload to your bank and pay electronically. Sage doesn't charge to create these, but your bank may charge to process, so you'll have to get with them and see what they allow. So that's a vendor, and from a vendor we get an invoice. So let's just pull up an invoice, and I think I have one listed here that has a few different things on it. Right. This invoice has been paid. You can see by the status. It's a contract invoice, so it's tied to a job. It has a purchase order. We can see what came in and what was tied to it. If I want to look at that PO, I can go over to my View Add Record, click on it, and it will bring up that purchase order so I can look at the data that's in it, what I have to date, what's outstanding. If I want to look at what job cost is affected by this, I can do that. I can go in. And by the way, when I talk about job cost, there's a section in the general ledger that's called direct expenses for Sage. You can call it cost of goods sold. There are a lot of different accounting versions for the same name. Anything that hits those particular accounts, the cost of goods sold, the direct expenses, the expenses that go on a job, anything that hits those accounts, you cannot save the record, whether it's a journal transaction, an AP invoice, an AR invoice, an equipment transaction. None of those can be saved unless you put a job, a cost code, and a cost type. You can't work your way around the software. The software is going to make sure that you stay in balance, that your books are in balance, and that you properly record direct expenses to whatever job they went to. Once you've received your invoice and you've entered your invoice, and it's time to pay your invoice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about payments. The software has a multi-step process for payment, and it's really around security more than anything else. It allows you to have one person actually pick what gets paid and a second person pay. So you could have an owner who would come in and I want to display invoices, and by the way, there's a lot of ways of displaying invoices. I can just look at a particular vendor, or I can pick them, or I can look at a job. A lot of ways to display the same information. There's my warnings. I've got certificates for all these vendors, which is not unusual in that my data is about 3 years old and everybody's expired at this point. But that owner can come in, they can look at those invoices, decide which ones to pay and mark them to pay. If you're still inside the discount date, it'll pre-fill the discount in here so you can keep track of it. And you mark what you want to pay and you hit save. So that a second person can then come in and pay the vendors. They come in, they select all they want to pay or just the one they want to pay. A lot of ways to go around that. And you hit pay vendor and go out and print the check. The checks, Sage has again, we have that custom report writer. It not only works for reports, but it works for checks. You don't have to buy your check stock from Sage. You can buy deluxe check stock. If you've got old QuickBooks or old Sage 50, you can use that. You can rearrange the face of the check to match whatever stock you have. So it lets you work with what you want to work with. I can print my checks. I can also I can pick one and say this is an ACH payment or it's a voucher. You see vouchers more in residential than you do in commercial. Voucher would be to where the bank is going to pay the vendor direct. And so you create the voucher, send it to the bank. The bank will process the voucher, take the money out of your account and pay the vendor from it. So I can also specify that I've already paid this by a credit card and keep track of that credit card. I can mark that I paid it online, which is a lot of vendors now. You go online and you can pay the bill. Or I can mark that I've already manually done a check. So there's a lot of ways to record or pay a vendor. 1099s, you can print your 1099s in the software. Sage is partnered with Atrix. Atrix has forms for every state and every federal form just about you can think of, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. I can also do reoccurring payables. Not every payment has to do with a job. Some payments are just part of life. The cable bill comes every month. The rent for the job site trailer or the rent for the office comes every month. You can set up recurring payables so that it automatically enters those things. And there is the credit card management. This is at an account and card level, so you can keep track of expenses as they come in. You can enter those receipts. You can job cost those receipts. You can keep track of everything that comes through. And there are the reports. I'm just going to look at an aging report just to show you one. Invoice aging by invoice date. Oh, and you have the option, by the way, of how to look at it. I can look at a current aging and it's going to look at due date, or I can look at by period and look at due date, or I can actually go by invoice date. Different companies like to look at their aging in different ways. I can change how it sorts. I can sort those invoices by the record number, by the vendor, or lump them in vendor and job. A lot of ways you can look at the same piece of data. And again, I can do my different criteria. Report forms are what's at the top. So if you want this to print to Excel, you can actually customize the form so it better fits Excel, and you can dump it straight to Excel, or I can print it with the system report and it's going to pop my logo up there and give me my aging. And again, with many of these, they're drillable. If I'm looking through an aging and I want to see what's going on with that particular invoice, I can drill down on it and bring it up and look at it. Okay, accounts payable. If you had any questions, let me know. And again, you saw my email at the front, you'll see my email at the back, you'll see my email in the notes, so you know how to get in touch with me. Next, I'm going to talk about these three that are together at the bottom: service, inventory, and equipment. These are all three optional modules. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I want you to have a high-level view. So I'm going to talk about service receivables. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a work order system. So if you are a heating and air, electrician, plumber, any drywall, any kind of service-oriented business, you have both sides of the software. You can have your job site where you're going out to jobs, you're going and putting in your ductwork, your HVAC and so forth, but you can also have the residential side where you don't want to create a new job for every house where you go in and replace an element in a water heater, that type of thing. So you create a work order. The work orders keep up with all the information. You have multiple locations. If you're doing service work, you can actually create routes in the software so that when you get ready to schedule, your route information is in here. You dispatch out and it keeps up with employees and dispatch times. You can turn that work order directly into an invoice, so it's one document for everything. I can put part numbers, I can bill for parts bill for time and material. I can keep up with insurance information if it's an insurance job. Just pop up the dashboard so you can kind of see what it looks like. Any open item that hasn't been scheduled is going to be over here in the category section. And I can just do a drag and drop. I can drop in the time. I'm going to say I'm going to schedule this one for Tim Lambert for 10 o'clock. And it's going to pop it over. I can also change the scheduling on it. Looks like it's going to be 2 or 3 hours. I can email just a quick summary of what's on the work order out to the electrician so they know what's going on. I can unassign it from the technician and move it back on the dispatch board, or I can go in and look at the work order. A lot of little things you can do. They're color coded based on the priority that you put in, and this priority is a custom list, so you can have whatever you want. I'm looking at a 1 day, but I could just as easily look at a 5 day. You decide who your technicians are. The technicians that are marked with an asterisk are actually outside technicians. These are vendors that you're using as contract labor. So you can dispatch your vendor as well. Great way to keep up with things for dispatch. Inventory. Inventory is tied to service receivables, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a standard inventory module. You keep up with parts. I can assign inventory in a work order and bill for a product, or I can look at it at a job level. If there's something I stock a lot of that I want to keep track of, I put it in inventory and I create a job ticket. And it's basically what it sounds like. I put the job in, where it's going, that I'm shipping it out of inventory to site, and it moves it. Inventory works off of a 2 out of 3 column process, and it makes it very simple. The allocation either has a source and an account, which means it got pushed to a job, or a source and a destination, which means I moved it from one warehouse to the other, or an account and a destination, which means it came back in from the job. So the one ticket covers all 3 places. You can tie inventory parts to a purchase order and bring in inventory. You can do inventory allocations. There is audit processes to keep up with your counts. There are records where you can set cycle counts up in the software, and I've got a couple customers that actually use cycle counts through the inventory module. Also want to talk a little bit about the equipment module. Equipment is so that you can take the equipment that you own, that you're paying overhead for, and take that cost and move it out to the job. So you come in, you set up a little bit of financial information and a little cost recovery to decide how much does it cost me to run this piece of equipment for an hour. Once I've done a few quick calculations, it processes that across a number of estimated hours per year. And now when I use this on a job site, I push this piece of equipment out to the job for 5 hours. I create an allocation of the inventory, or allocation of the equipment to the job, and it transfers that cost out of overhead to job. So you get a real honest look at what that job cost is. Otherwise, you're making your best guess on your overhead. How much did I use it for that? It also lets you keep up with maintenance schedules as well. It's not just for allocating to the job, but you can keep up with maintenance schedules. You can keep up with individual revenue. You can keep up with cost. You can also keep up with your depreciation. There's some setups in the software where you can go and put in your depreciation, and each month you just say, post my depreciation for my equipment. It posted at an equipment level so that you can tell and track at a piece of equipment level what's going on. You can also keep track by reporting and look at your maintenance schedules to make sure maintenance is on time. You can do reporting, and you can do an automatic alert built in the software to keep up with it, so you can see where those pieces need to be treated. I haven't changed the oil in this. I haven't kept up with this. There's also a cost piece that's tied to this. You have a job cost actually for your equipment. So if I go in and replace tires, I could have a cost code for tires, and I could look across the last 3 years, what have I spent on tires for equipment, and I can keep up with that. So it's a great way to keep up with that maintenance as well as the cost that's tied to it. Okay, we've got 3 things left to cover, and I appreciate everybody hanging in there with me. I want to talk about payroll. We'll open this up. We'll start with looking at an employee, and we'll pull up an employee record. Sage has a fully functioning payroll system. And I'm just going to put in the general information, There's a Human Resources tab where you come in and put in the information, what workers' comp is tied to it, what their position is. The positions actually have a meaning, and it's not just an assignment, it's where the payroll goes. Depending on what your position is, it will process and put those wages in whatever account it needs to fall in, depending on what you're doing when you're doing it. Works with unions, local payroll, tax districts, exemptions. The compensation package lets you put in the hourly rate or the salary or a commission or any advances that come in. You can check whether or not you have retirement plans or other W-2 options. You can accrue sick leave. You can accrue vacation time. There's a direct deposit where you can create the ACH file, and it can be broke into 4 different accounts when it does the deposit. You have custom calculations that you can create in. When you first set up software, you'll hit the button to pull in all the major ones, the FICA, the Medicare, Medicaid, federal taxes, but then you can create the others. You can create a state unemployment. All of these calculations are set up. And I'm going to hit F6, which is the view add record again, and pull up a calculation just so you can see what it looks like. You specify what type of calculation it is, whether it's a elective deferral, like a 401k, and it's deducted from the employee, or if it's employer cost, how it's being calculated. In this case, it's a percent of gross, and so I can put in a percent for this particular employee, and it's going to do the withholding for their 401k, whether or not it's subject to any taxes, disposable income, and so forth. You can have as many different calculations tied to an employee as you'd like. Additional contacts. There's also a full ACA tab that lets you keep up with ACA settings, whether it's for the employee or for an additional spouse or family member that needs to tie to it. You also have some history record here. You can have a raise history, so you can keep track of what's going on with the employee. You can edit the banking information, which is actually a flag. You may allow some employees to go in, but they can't get to certain areas, so you can restrict who can get into that banking information and look at it. You also have some training records. You can see down at the bottom, you can keep up with training or licenses that you require the employee to have, all tied into this one record. Time. I guess that's the big question. How do I enter time? Well, there's actually more than one way to skin the cat. There's a daily payroll entry that lets you, every day you can go in and you can put in the employees and what they did that day and keep up with the daily payroll record. We talked a little bit about earlier when we were over in project management, there is the daily field report where a supervisor would go in and put who did what on the job for that day. You can actually just import that information straight into time cards. And so time cards, the payroll records themselves. Eventually, no matter how you enter that payroll, whether you put it in a daily payroll, you put it in daily field report, or you use Sage Field Operations and record that time in the field, or you use Sage Construction Project Center and record that time in the field, it's all eventually going to end up in payroll records, the time cards. And so we're going to look in time cards. Actually, I forgot to show you something earlier, so I'm going to do that now. If I click down here in the bottom, you'll see the click here just barely in the corner. It lets me edit this desktop. I can say if I'm the payroll person, I do payroll all the time, this is something I do a lot. So I can drag that over and save it. So when I go to do payroll, I can just double click and go straight in to my payroll record. And it opens the payroll record. I'm going to look at a record just so you can see what it looks like. This is the time card. It shows the days, a description of the work, the job, the cost code, whether or not it's certified payroll. The payroll of the software does work with Davis-Bacon payroll. It also works with union payroll, and so you have pay groups that are tied to that, and workers' comp. It shows the calculations that came from that information, what the Social Security was, Medicare, Medicaid, small tool use, liability insurance, and so forth that pulls into the software from there. Once you have created the time cards and you've calculated everything, it's time to pay the employee. There is a pay process that's built in. I can print my payroll checks and hand them out. I can create a direct deposit. In doing the direct deposit, it actually goes one step further. I can actually go in, I can create my direct deposit records. And where this is a little bit different, the direct deposit records actually will create a payslip, convert it to a PDF, password protect it with the employee's social security number, and email it to the employee. So if I'm doing direct deposit, I still don't have to hand out pay slips. I can have an employee who is in North Carolina but working in Virginia, and they're going to get a pay slip in their email no matter where they are. So it's automated to let you keep up with that. You can also reprint those pay stubs at any time if you need to. Speaking of which, living in North Carolina and working in Virginia, software does keep up with multi-state payroll. So you cannot live where you work or not work where you live. There are records for all 50 states. So I'm in North Carolina, so I can click on North Carolina. It allows me to fill out my NC3s and do my NC5 report. For federal, it has a full federal system, so I can look at my 941s or my Guam records or my Virgin Island records. Sage is partnered with Atrix. All Atrix does is forms. And so this is built into the system. There's no additional charge for working with those forms in the software. Lastly, while we're in payroll, I'll talk a little bit about HR forms. There is a piece in the software that's called HR forms. I'll pull that up. It's exactly what it sounds like. You can create packets in books. I can have a new hire packet. I can have a probation packet. I have a termination packet. You create all of these records. They create a form fill. So if I need to create this packet, I pick the employee I'm going to create it for and hit setup. And it goes out and creates that packet. It pre-fills with the information off the employee record. And you have your new hire packet or your termination packet or whatever it needs to be. And it is built in the software. It's part of the standard module and it's not an additional cost. Okay, one module to go before we hit our odds and ends, and we're going to talk about General Ledger. I'm going to close some of this up. Go into the General Ledger. General Ledger in Sage is either a 4-digit or a 5-digit setup, just to kind of look at an account so you can see what the accounts look like. Click a little bit faster this time. Here we go. The accounts are broken into a preset division, but not necessarily preset accounts. So Sage uses a 17 division breakdown. It's pretty standard. It's the cash accounts, current assets, and so forth, going all the way down. Direct expenses, the one we talked about earlier. These are the accounts that are going to be job specific. And so I'm just going to pull one particular account so you can look at it. All the accounts have a full name and a short name. Full name is what shows up in reporting. Short name is what shows up in the grids when you're processing it. It's tied as a direct expense based on where it's located number-wise, and you get to pick that. You can preload or you can set up your own accounts. This particular account is departmentalized. Your income statement can be departmentalized. You can have 5, 6, 10 departments, whatever's going to make sense for you. So that if you want to see how your new residential is doing versus your remodel, or if you're in commercial, I want to see how my industrial commercial projects are doing versus my standard commercial projects versus my government commercial projects. You could set up a departmentalized accounting and keep up with your income statement that way. So it lets you do that. You also can put in budgets while I'm thinking about it. And here there are several reports that compare budget to actual on the income statement, so I can keep up with my budgets in here as well. The setup for the GL is fairly straightforward, just so we can look at it. This is one of the standards. Again, this is a 4-digit. It could just easily be the 5-digit version. It's the ranges so that when I put an account between $5,000 and $55.99, it's going to be a direct expense. But you can decide what these ranges are. It does have to be a continuous range so that wherever my current assets end, that's where my WIP accounts pick up. But otherwise, it is just a range of accounts. I can go in and specify my year. It does allow you to pick your fiscal year. I've got many clients who run July to June. I've got a couple that actually run October to September, or you could be a January to December. The current period, the verified date pops up a warning. If I post an invoice and it's dated in May, but I'm posting it in June, I'm going to get a warning. Keeps up, kind of keeps you honest. Dedicated accounts, exactly what it sounds, where my assets for my equipment are going to go, where's my accounts receivable account, my service account, and so forth. And then posting accounts. There's some automated posting that goes on in the software, and it tells it where to do that automated posting. Where do I want to put my sales tax payable if I'm processing that? Where does my workers' comp go? Let you keep track with that. There's also an offset account if you're working with inventory and inventory valuation, and you have 3 different types of inventory. You can do a weighted average, a LIFO, or a FIFO in Sage. Just to kind of give you a quick overview, you can write checks out of the general ledger. You can deposit money into the general ledger. There is a journal entry. It's fairly standard as most journal entries go. Debits and credits. I'm going to open this up so you can see it. Debits and credits. This particular one has a sub-account, which happens to be a department. Description. If this had a payee involved, it would pre-fill with the payee. If it had job cost involved, which it does because it's a 5001, I'll have job cost. I can also look at the bottom and see where it came from. This came from inventory. An inventory transaction occurred to make this journal entry. So if I want to see what that transaction was, I can pull it up. Again, it's very drillable that you can go down through the software and see what you want. There's a bank reconciliation piece that's in here. The last 3 versions have been online compatible of Sage. So I can go in and set up my bank account and tie it to my account in my general ledger. And when I go to reconcile, I can pull in those transactions and reconcile them directly with the bank electronically. It's a great new feature that's come in. These are, when I talk about departmentalized, this particular company has got 2 departments, so that's that setup there. You can have recurring transactions, so if I'm doing a monthly adjustment for jobs, I can create a reoccurring. If I'm doing a monthly depreciation, that's always a great example. You can set those depreciation entries up as reoccurring, and you just go in and specify. They do not run automatic. None of the reoccurrings, whether it's a journal entry or an AP or an AR, they don't run automatic. You actually go into the software and you say, I want to run all my journal entries that are due before a particular date, and it will create those journal entries for you. So you don't ever have to worry about the software creating an entry that you didn't know was going to happen. You're going to drive that, but the basics and everything are set up ahead of time, so you don't have to keep up with it. As far as reporting is concerned, I'll hop into accounting and reporting for a minute. There's a trial balance, standard balance sheet, standard income statement. Just to give you a quick view of what's available in income statements. Let's open this up. I can have a departmental income statement. I can have a standard. I can have a period versus year to date. I can be budget versus actual in the standard as in the departmental. I can look at the GL cost comparison. There are a lot of things I can do in my income statement. There's also a financial documents piece. Sage allows you to financial report, excuse me. Sage allows you to work with more than one company. Right now I have this many companies in my data. I could have as many as I want to. Doesn't matter. Allows you to keep up a lot of different companies. This allows you to combine those companies for financial reporting. So if I want to look at a balance sheet and an income statement for a combined look, I can go in and pick which companies I want to combine. I want to look at one for this, and this, and run the report, and I'm going to get it. I picked 2 that didn't have the same fiscal year, so it won't let me do it, but I can combine those, and I can get a balance sheet and a income statement that is at that level. I can also do some rounding. There are several places in the balance sheet and in the income statement that I can make those decisions. I just want to round to the nearest dollar. I don't want to look at pennies when I'm looking at year ends. Whether or not to show the account so it's a nice clean, and whether or not to skip. So if I'm doing a balance sheet, I can tell it to skip 0 accounts, so I'm not looking at those. I can put a logo in if I want to. I can look at the comparisons as well. So a lot of different ways you can pull in that GL. Okay, lastly, we're going to talk about odds and ends. Just kind of clean up some shop. These are things that really don't fall in any other category, but we're just going to cover them all at one time. Security. Security in the software can be a couple different ways, a couple different directions, so it really is what makes best sense for you. Mine is set to, I'm actually going to exit completely out of the software and go back in, which you know is always a scary thing because you never know what you've done to create problems. But when you first go into Sage 100 Contractor, you have a couple options on how you want to set your security up. My security is set for Windows authentication. So if I can log into my computer, I can get into my software. Everything is tied to that. But if you don't want that, you can set a SQL authentication. So you'd have a username and password. So it's really up to you how you want, and you can mix and match. You could have 3 customers that can get in with Windows authentication through domain, or you could go in through SQL authentication. If you don't have a domain, if you're working more off of a workstation and you've got a souped up workstation using as a server, which means you're doing a work group, you'll use the SQL authentication. You have a username and password. So you go in, reminding me of things I'm supposed to do. Go into the software, you pick the company you want to go into, and I'm going to go in with admin rights because I have those rights, and so I'm going to go in. That's part of the security. If I have admin, I can go anywhere and do anything, so you decide who gets to have that. But it's role-based, and so you go in and go into utilities and security, and I set up groups, and I decide what I want a group to do. And just briefly to walk through, these are the things that this group can do. I can say the GL group can save, they can void, but they're not allowed to delete. They can change a period and they can print checks. So I decide those different groups. Then I take users and decide what I'm going to let my users belong to. And so I pick the groups they can belong to. And you can have as many as 5 different groups for any one user. Then once I've done my groups and I've done all my employees, I decide what my groups are going to do. And it really is a fairly point and shoot thing. I'm going to click on Payroll. I'm going to hit F7, and that's the security key in Sage. It's going to bring up my security. And I decide which groups are allowed to get into Payroll. I could secure Payroll. I could secure this menu underneath Payroll. I can secure this menu underneath that. I can even secure an individual field and say only certain people are allowed to go in and put an entry in the home phone number. So you can get a very complicated system, or you can get a very simple system, and the software really allows you to customize that, what's going to make best sense for you when you go in. Schedule reports is another piece. When I go in to print a report, and we talked a little bit about that, but I'm going to go in and pick up a chart of accounts, just a nice general report. I can schedule from here to when the report goes out. That's what the schedule report is for. It allows you to go in and you can decide which reports are past schedule and I want to delete them. I don't have to go back to where they were created. I can actually go to my reports scheduler and look at those information and see what goes out. Email. Another thing we talked about in reporting, and I'll pull my chart of accounts back up since I exited. If I want to email this out of the software, I can actually set this up. I set up my email settings, put what my SMP, my server is, what my password, my username and everything. I can save that. I can put in a subject. I can pick who I want to send this to. From my list, I can send it to multiple people. I haven't copied it myself. I can even, on some screens, it lets me add additional reports. Over on the PO screen, if I print a PO, I get to add other documents. So if I've got job documents that I need to add to the invoice, I can go out and do that. And when I say job documents, I am literally talking about job documents. The software lets me pick a job and attach documents to it. And I could have 30 job documents in here. I could have 2. When I go to do a PO, I can pick from these documents and attach it to a purchase order. So if I have certain requirements for a subcontract, for example, and I've got requirements I want to attach with it, I can reach out here and attach it, and it's all part of that email process that's been in the software. Contacts managers. We talked about on the employee there were contacts, on the job there were contacts, on the AP there were contacts. There are contacts everywhere in the software. There's a little utility called the contact manager, and it lets you look at everybody everywhere. So I'm just going to load up. And we'll drag it over here. These are all the contacts that are in my little sample company and where they are, whether it's a vendor or an employee or it's a job, a lot of different ways it can be there. you can actually sync this with Outlook. And so I can go in, I can click sync with Outlook, and anybody that's in here that's not in Outlook, it will create a user in Outlook for them. Vice versa, I can sync backward and bring things in. So if I sync with Outlook and create a user in Outlook and I change their email address over in Outlook and hit sync, it's going to change the email back in the software. So it's a two-way communication with Outlook. Makes it a lot easier when it comes time to keep track. You know, one of the worst things in the world is to have the same person listed in 20 places and you're not sure which one's right. This allows you to have one source of truth and everything syncs together and it's right. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the Alerts Manager. It's a little hidden piece that's down here. It's exactly what it sounds like. I can create warnings in the software. I can say, I want to know when I've got a job cost that's exceed a budget amount, or somebody posted a transaction that's out of date. I can set these up as alerts, and I can decide how I want to be alerted. I can see it on my dashboard. You know, we talked about when the dashboard was up, there's an alert section, or I can have it send me an email. So if I want to know when a job is over budget, I can specify it. I can have it send me an email. And when something posted and jumps it over budget, I'm going to get the email. Or somebody puts in a date that's wrong, it's going to let me know. Or I've got a PO that's wrong. A lot of ways to keep track of what's going on in the software without being in front of the software is to handle that Alerts Manager. Okay, we're going to wrap up. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to call me. My phone number is listed here on this screen. You can call me at 704-721-6800 and you can say the extension. Email address is there. Send me an email, or if you'd like, you can leave a comment in the comment section below for the video. I appreciate everything. If you have any questions about Sage 100 Contractor or any of the other Sage solutions you see here, let me know. Hope everybody has a great day. Thanks. Take care.